Why are black men struggling so much with embracing manhood?
Mm. Because it serves the enemies of black people to ensure that that is the case. That's a short. I can make that just my answer. All right, now next question. If you want me to elaborate on it, there's a noted psychologist, Nana Amos Wilson. Now he would say that every maladaptive character trait that you see in the personality of black people is there, not because we want it to be there, but because it serves the interests of those who put it there. There's a quote along those lines that says, if you want to understand any problem, in that case he's talking about in the United States of a murderer, if you want to understand any problem, don't look at who suffers from the problem, look at who benefits from the problem. And this is related to, oftentimes people talk about, and you may have had this, you're a black man, I'm a black man, where there's like a white woman in an elevator and she'll clutch her purse like, now what is that? That is that she knows something about all the atrocities that have been created, not just by the white man, but the white mother who told the white man to do that, right? Because, people like to let the white woman off the hook. Oh, let's go get voting rights for white women. Oh, no. Who raised the white man to do the lynching? And then, when he brought the severed black penis, who's the one who put it in the attic as a keepsake, as an heirloom, as a hand-me-down? Nothing but, the white woman. So I can come back to that point if you want, but, let's deal with the point at hand. So essentially, the reason why there's a manhood crisis is because oftentimes we don't learn about the history until we have a black studies course in college, but they know about Nana Paul Bogle, who said cleave to the black. They know about Nana Samuel Sharp, and directly because of Nana Samuel Sharp is why they had to, the brutish I'm talking about, had to abolish enslavement. Within 1 week of the suppression of Nana Samuel Sharp's rebellion, they put together a committee about how they can end enslavement. Within just a few years of them, and again, I'm talking about the brutish, which was the superpower at that time. We're talking about now in the early 1800s. People know about Haiti defeating the French, but many people don't know that Haiti also defeated the brutish, and they don't know that they also defeated the Spanish. But within just a couple of years of the brutish being put down, because again, at the time, the brutish and the French were at war. So the brutish were like, all right, let's attack this, former French colony and then bring it in, because that was a pearl of the Antilles. So it's like this strategic military thing that's going on. So the brutish sent in all of these, military conscripts, and they had over 10,000 of them that were killed. At that, at any time, that's a huge loss. But over 10,000 of them were killed. They died due to diseases and so forth and so on. So it was a major upheaval. So imagine in England where they think that they have the military superpower of the world and they're beaten by these, black people. It caused such an upheaval that's why they had to abolish the quote unquote trade, bringing in more black people. And why did they do that? Again, it's military. Now, what white people like to say is, they heard violins and they were tugging on their heartstrings and they had pangs of conscience and so forth and so on. But when you read the documents at that time, and those documents are available, they said they fear. The United Snakes of a Murder at that time said that they feared that the same uprising that happened in Haiti could also happen in the United States. So the only thing they talked about was not about moral, blah, blah, blah. They talked about fear in terms of why they actually made the decisions that they made at the time. So again, just coming back to that point, where you look at IT, where, quote unquote, white people are aware of Nana Jean-Jacques Dessalines, who was very, very much an epitome, a paradigm of manhood. They're, familiar with Nana Denmark Vesey, Nana Gabriel Prosser. They're familiar. Some of them are even familiar with Sarah Kamos in classical Kemet, who drove the Hyksos out. Some of them are familiar with, I can go down the list. Nana Kimathi wa Gachuri. Some of them who people know as Didan Kimathi. People are familiar with all of these examples of manhood. So if you don't want a man who is going to challenge you, who's going to cut your heads off, who's going to take back the land, who is going to do all those things, the best thing for them to do is to make sure there are no men around. They have various ways of doing that. One is by confusing black people, black men in terms of their identity and making them think that they should rather be women, to make them think that they should be boys for their entire life. Another way is through the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. if you read Medical Apartheid by Obenfo Harriet Washington, she talks about the experiments that were done in Philadelphia in the prisons. She talks about, these towns where they would release mosquitoes in order to, either release dengue fever or yellow fever, all these things over the course of time. So my father, and this is Obenfo Obadele Kambon, and we're dedicating, I mentioned earlier, the Abibitumi conference to my father, Obenfo Obadele Kambon, who passed away at the end of 2023. He wrote an article on racial profiling and the rise of the Black Messiah, racial profiling, the New World Order, and the rise of the Black Messiah. And the point that he made is very similar to a speech that he gave on C-SPAN that some of your viewers may be familiar with. But essentially, the point that he made is that when you see, that document, the COINTELPRO document that is now in circulation, where they said that J. Edgar Hoover said that he's trying to prevent the rise of a Black Messiah, that when they're trying to document people, they're taking people's fingerprints. They have stop and frisk where they're trying to get everybody into a database. They're doing retina scans, and biometric is tied to your passport or your ID, all these things. Why are they trying to get all this information on Black people, not just in the United States, but throughout the world? And the point that he makes is for the exact same reason as COINTELPRO. They want to prevent the rise of a Black Messiah. But the point that my father made, which is similar to a point made by Nana Fred Hampton, is that you can kill a revolutionary, but you can't kill a revolution. You can kill a freedom fighter, but you can't kill freedom fighting. And, the point that he's making is that this Black Messiah that they're so afraid of is not necessarily a person per se. The Black Messiah is an idea. And that idea is already out in the universe. Just like, any idea that you can imagine, people sat down, they thought about something, and they came up with a solution to their problem. So if our problem is white people, then our solution is there in the universe and is right there. So my father also articulated what he said, this is a solution to, or the solution rather, to the number one problem on the planet Earth. So if you have a man, or if you have men, or if you have manhood, any of the above, where it's going to be a threat to the existence of white people. And this is one thing that, quote unquote, white people have in common. And to bring it beyond white people, all Eurasians have in common is that they all want to survive. And this is, not a fault of theirs. Every life form has that in common. They want to survive. And I should say every life form except for Black people who have been under the tutelage of white people. We don't want to survive. We want white people to survive. And there's a reason for that. So white people want to survive. And then Black people also want white people to survive at our expense. And it's like the house Negro and the field Negro thing, where you find, Black people who's going to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, or going to be the Secretary of the Interior, or going to be Secretary of State, all of these different roles that we play for white people. And the reason why I extracted to all life forms is that you have a similar type of thing with, in California, you have this ant called Polyergus, and this is what they call a slave-catching ant. What does it do? It's a red ant that goes out and enslaves Black ants. And what it does is it takes the larvae of the Black ants, brings it back to its own colony, and it coats the Black ant larvae with pheromones, because, ants are operating on eyesight. Because if they did say, hey, you're a red ant, I know, whatever, they're operating on pheromones. This is the miseducation process, the analogy that I'm giving here. And what they do is that those Black ants, they serve the interests of red ants, even to the detriment of other Black ants, because they don't know to do any better and they've been miseducated to do so. Now, there are videos online where you can actually see this process and what goes on, but I actually came across a scientific article that mentioned that sometimes those Black ants have rebellions. And those are rebellions because these ants are essentially, the Black ants are essentially worker ants. They're not queen ants. They can't give birth, so forth. But they have these rebellions where they start to slaughter wholesale the larvae of the red ants that enslave them. Red ants don't like that. So the red ants would like to stop, Black ants from having an identity where they realize I'm different from these red ants. I should be fighting these red ants. These red ants are my enemies because, again, they want to survive just like any other, creature. So Eurasians in general want to survive. And that came up when my father gave that speech, because none of the white people were saying that what my father said was wrong. None of them said that it was morally wrong or anything else. They just said you don't have the power to do so. Meanwhile, the Black people Like, no, you shouldn't do that. Everybody needs to live. Let's all hold hands, kumbaya, and hold hands. So the only living creature that I know of that of their own, volition, to whatever degree we could call it their own volition, they want their enemies to survive are, black people who have been under the tutelage of non-black people, Eurasians in general, whether that's the Chinese, whether that is Arabs, because you got black people who want to be Wu-Tang, right? You got black people who want to be, Arab worshipers. They want to pray to a stone in a desert and pretend like they live in a desert and do ablutions on their fingertips as though they don't live in places where there are abundant, waters. That's the deification of Arab culture played out. But they want to pray to an imaginary, white man on a stick. That's the reason why they gave you the imaginary white man on a stick. It's not to save your soul. It's not so you can go to heaven. It's because it serves the interest, just like those red ants are served by putting pheromones on the black ants to confuse them, so that they're now serving the interests of the red ants. So the red ants don't have to do anything all day, but just lay in a pile and, lounge around and eat and gorge themselves on what the black ants regurgitate for them.